I have no idea who Richard E. Goddard was. He was supposed to be a sales guru according to Ramblehouse. Specifically in the 1916 General Cargo, an introduction to salesmanship, Goddard is called foreign sales manager to Humber Limited Coventry, a motor vehicle company. I have, however, found that Richard E. Goddard was the author of several stories published in Australian and New Zealand periodicals, including stories such as The Lone Farm Mystery, The Usurper, and The Jonah, as well as a very obscure novel called Bambusa. There are also 4 plays attested under this name between 1924 and 1926. It is entirely possible Goddard spent his time in Australia in his capacity as foreign sales manager, and that he published his stories while living there. Today we will review his 1936 The Whistling Ancestors. The story begins in London, where Pat Worthington is sat on the sidewalk drawing images with chalk for money. I had actually thought he was homeless, but he apparently does have a home, and does this as a result of his time in the war unsettling his nerves. As he sits there, he is given money by a pretty girl named Inez and a somewhat more fussy friend Bridget. But as these two leave, he notices 2 suspicious people who had been shadowing the girls for some time. Dr. Caspar Pettifrank, running a rejuvenation clinic to drain money out of old women, and an older woman called Maman Constance. In brief, the two begin debating abducting the girls and sacrificing them on an old druidic stone in Cornwall. Then they duck into a nearby church, where Pat hears Maman summon the chirping spirits of dead ancestors to tell them how to best prepare for the arrival of Satan. Endeavoring to save Inez due to his obvious fancy for her after she was so nice to him, he reaches her home, but they soon discover Bridget had been abducted off the road. Pat and Inez then motor to Cornwall to look for her, while Bridget is mentally regressed by Caspar to an 8-year-old by means of drugs. Pat tries to avoid telling Inez what else he found in Caspar's studio, namely that Caspar is organizing an international conspiracy to make the West destroy itself, then to rile up his African and Asian allies and form a continent-sized kingdom in Africa devoted entirely to Satan. He found out about this after snooping around Caspar's studio and wanting to be inconspicuous, but leaving behind many obvious clues he had been there for no reason but doing so deliberately. Mind you, Pat wants to upset Caspar's plans by himself and so tells no one. This of course only goes well. Arriving in Cornwall, Pat and Inez are soon taken prisoner, and Pat finds out what they are doing in their underground laboratory, surgically transforming people into satyrs and harpies to form Satan's court when he arrives on Earth. Beside the mad Dr. Kuczynski, Pat also encounters a gang of actual zombies, whom he reminds of the fact they are dead, to their infinite horror, and has them run off to jump back into their graves. Eventually, Caspar's mansion burns down due to a series of hidden explosives, and Caspar escapes, while Maman Constance is left a charred corpse. The elephant in the room is Goddard's racial prejudice. His whole yellow peril plot combined with a black peril one involving voodoo, Satan, and a massive conspiracy is definitely not the most fairly nuanced. But then one of the characters named Polynice reveals his intentions to convince Caspar to give up on the whole Satan idea and focus on the peaceful liberation of the non-white subjects in the Western colonies. So Goddard agrees it's a good idea then. Finally, the really odd thing is the book is written in first person, narrated by Pat, but then he starts narrating events he wasn't even there for and even other people's private thoughts. And there's just no explanation for this.